In the Star Wars movies and series, we see a lot of different Imperial ships, like the Star Destroyers or the Gozanti cruisers. But a ship that was extremely important to the Empire and, to be honest, looks pretty cool, has received far too little love so far from the fans, which is why we're going to take a closer look at that today. The Altor Class Replenishment ship. We look at how the ship came to Star Wars, what it was good for, which legends and canon stories it appeared in, and what creative uses we might see for such a ship in the future. But first, what kind of ship was it? The Altor supply ship was a huge beast and significantly larger than most other Imperial ships. At 4.6 kilometers long, it was 3 kilometers longer than a normal Star Destroyer, and only 400 meters too short to be classified as a dreadnought, or Super Star Destroyer. Although the ship probably wouldn't be classified as a dreadnought anyway, let alone a battlecruiser, which it would have the size for but not the weapons. But we'll get to that in a moment. But from the name and appearance of the ship, you can probably already tell what the ship was intended for. Equipped with 6 huge tanks, these supply ships were designed to distribute raw materials to other ships. A job the Empire desperately needed to carry out all the tasks of its fleets. Although the Empire formally controlled 99% of the galaxy, the star systems in the galaxy were completely different depending on where they were located. The Empire tried to maintain a presence everywhere with its fleets and ships, either to nip any potential rebellions in the bud, or later, when the Galactic Civil War really flared up, to directly detect hidden rebel pockets throughout the galaxy. This was easy in the core-facing regions of the galaxy. The Empire's support was high, there were many densely populated and industrialized planets, and it seemed as if there were space stations on every corner where Imperial ships could refuel, be serviced, or repaired. This was also relatively easy on the major trade routes. Along these routes, there were a number of densely populated wealthy planets or simply large waypoints with large space stations. But further out, where people didn't feel as closely watched by the Empire, or where the rebels preferred to hide, it became more difficult. These were areas of the galaxy with little infrastructure, areas that were perhaps not so well disposed towards the Empire, and especially areas with few, small, slow hyperspace lanes. Fleets operating there eventually had to refuel, and their ships had to be serviced. Perhaps even receive new supplies such as water and food. And that took time. To do this, the ships had to find the many slow hyperspace lanes back to a larger trade route, and then be lucky enough to find space stations further out that could supply the entire fleet at once. If there were no suitable space stations, the fleet had to wait until all the ships were ready one after the other. Split the fleet up among different space stations in different systems, which could be dangerous, or fly further toward the core with the whole fleet. None of which was ideal, and that's when the Altor class supply ship came into play. Because it was large enough and had enough cargo capacity to supply entire fleets even with the largest ships. It could allow 2 large ships to dock at the same time, from battlecruisers to dreadnoughts, or several smaller ships to supply them with the contents of their tanks. Original sources state that these tanks contained fuel, but as we see in other stories, they could also transport other liquids. So water or liquid food supplies are also a possibility. And with their length of 4.6 kilometers, they also had several dry docks in which they could accommodate ships up to the size of frigates and service them there. This meant that supplies could be brought to the fleet instead of the fleet to the supplies. This, of course, could put significantly more pressure on rebels in the Outer Rim if the fleets didn't have to split up at regular intervals or disappear completely to receive supplies. And thus significantly longer operations were enabled for the Empire. This made the ships of the Altor class extremely important vessels in the Imperial fleet. However, we have no information about the armament of these ships. This is partly due to their origin, because the ships were originally purely fan designs by Ansel Hsiao, known online as Fractal Sponge. But when Lucasfilm was working on the excellent Essential Guide to Warfare, they were looking for outstanding artists who could provide images for the book. And they found Fractal Sponge's designs. He delivered with 3D renderings of well-known ships, reinterpretations of ugly comic book background ships, and his own designs. And the Altor class ship fell into the latter category, among others, which brought it into the old canon. The Essential Guide to Warfare was released in April of 2012, but in the same year Star Wars was bought by Disney, and very soon all of this information was pushed into the Legends continuity, essentially shutting down all further Legends stories, which meant that the Altor class ship had little chance of appearing in Legends stories anyway. In the next years, the ship was kept alive through other fan works, such as Empire at War mods like Thrawn's Revenge, some of which you can see in the footage here. But then came the canon comics, and above all one volume of these canonical Star Wars comics, volume 36 of the Star Wars comic run since 2020, brought a lot of Legends spacecraft of the Empire into canon, including our first image of a canonical Golan space station, but also a story revolving around an Altor Class Replenishment ship. Here the Rebel Alliance is planning an attack on Coruscant itself, and wants to use such an Altor Class ship as a kind of Trojan horse. Here the ship isn't carrying fuel, but rather disgustingly smelling fertilizer, which is why it isn't thoroughly examined by the Empire, which in turn allows Rebel ships hiding in this fertilizer to make it undetected to Coruscant. A pretty cool and creative idea for the appearance of such a ship. But then I ask myself the question, in recent years some of the Disney Plus Star Wars series have brought things from the most obscure details of Legends into canon, be it the Gorman Massacre, the ITT in The Mandalorian and Rebels, or the Cantwell-class Arrestor cruiser in Solo and Andor. If an Altor class ship were to appear in further stories, what role could the ship play, maybe in another season of The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, or a whole new series? Of course, simply as world building in the background somewhere, but that would be boring. I have a few more interesting ideas. We know that the ship was actually intended to transport fuel for the Empire. What if the rebels took advantage of it? What if they hijacked an Altor class ship and used it themselves? Then they could, say, equip the ship with droids and use it exactly when a large battlecruiser or super star destroyer needs to refuel. Fly the ship close to the super star destroyer, have it dock, and then blow up the Altor class ship. Considering the fact that this thing is almost 5 kilometers long, a quarter the length of an Executor Super Star Destroyer, and that it's probably carrying highly explosive fuel, this could destroy the entire Super Star Destroyer. Something like this could have appeared in Andor or in a follow-up series, or even be a story in a future Mandoverse series where New Republic operatives try to destroy ships of Imperial warlords, or a Fania story. The Imperials, let's say, are blockading a planet and can't leave, so this fleet requests an Altor class ship to resupply them. The rebels try to exploit this to give the people on the planet a chance to escape, so they smuggle things into the Altor's water supplies, which supplies the blockade with fresh water. And half a day later, maybe a day later, the entire crew has diarrhea and are vomiting. Because everyone on board of every of these ships is thirsty and everyone needs to drink at some point, only a fraction of the crew is able to man the ships. And the Imperials are too distracted to prevent the rebels from escaping the planet. Or the rebels steal such a ship to deliver the wrong fuel for certain ships. They basically load the Star Wars equivalent of gasoline into the diesel engines of the Imperial ships, something that just causes the ship's engines to stop working after a short time. The rebels maybe are posing as Imperials on a captured Altor Class ship. They refuel most of the Imperial ships of one fleet with the correct fuel, but one or two ships with the wrong fuel. And when the Imperial ships leave again, the incorrectly fueled ships have problems after a short time and have to be left behind. And the rebels have an easy time boarding and taking over these smaller ships. There are a lot of other scenarios that would be possible, but thanks to the unique function of the ships and their very different appearance, I think they are extremely cool, and I'd love to see them used in a somewhat creative way, be it in a live-action series, an animated series, or a military sci-fi Star Wars novel. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about Star Wars ships, check out my 50 facts video about Imperial Star Destroyers linked here in the end card. I wish you all a great day and may the Force be with you.